If you're riding shotgun with me right now on what is looking like another beautiful day in Los Angeles, I think we're going up to 72 degrees today. There's a little bit of wind happening, some clouds in the sky. They're a little bit gray, but I don't think it's going to rain, although we could use it. If you are riding with me, then we would have the windows cracked, the sun would be doing its thing, and I would be turning down the volume just a bit on the song Breathin' by Ariana Grande. Not because I don't love the song, but because I actually want you to hear what this episode is all about. I do think this song was the perfect one to pick for my Spotify playlist. So if you are following along on the Morning Commute episode vibes, then you would be seeing Ariana Grande's song Breathin' because I think it captures what so many school-based clinicians live inside of each and every single day. And that is showing up, holding it together, checking the boxes, all while your body might quietly be saying, this is a lot. So just keep breathing. And I think for the longest time ever, that's what so many of us were actually taught to do. Go ahead and breathe through it, Stephanie. Push through it. Be grateful that we even have a job. But I don't think this episode is really about just pushing through. It's what happens when the workload and that caseload stop being something that you can just regulate your way out of and start becoming something that really needs to be named and addressed and advocated for. So today we are talking about the real impact of high caseloads and workloads. So I'm talking about the service minutes, the missed sessions, the paperwork, the emotional toll, the efficiency strain, and I think ultimately how students are also affected when clinicians become stretched past their capacity. So, yeah, breathe in sets this vibe perfectly. And keep in mind, this episode is about more than just trying to survive the day. It's about what it looks like when we stop gasping quietly and we start advocating clearly. It's that nonviolent communication, right? It's those skills that we can learn, those soft skills. So if you really want to lean into that vibe or you just need a soundtrack for your next commute, all the songs that I have pair with each episode. And again, it's on the Morning Commute episode vibes. Check out my playlist on Spotify. You can replay them again and again while just sort of reflecting or even decompressing. So if you've ever opened your caseload list and you've sighed a little deeply and thought, this cannot be how this job is supposed to feel, then I want you to know this episode is for you. I want to sort of normalize that overwhelm. There's a lot of us feeling it. And if you're listening right now, maybe you are driving along, you're riding in your car before your next session, you're headed to, someone's house, or you're in the schools and you're going back to back, session to session. I want you to check in and I want you just to notice your body. Because if your shoulders are feeling tightened, or maybe you're nodding along and you're thinking, yes, Stephanie, like I'm stressed out. My caseload, my workload is high and I feel it. I feel the physical toll. I want you to know that this episode is already about you. I want to name the quiet thoughts that I think sometimes people don't say out loud, or maybe sometimes they do. But we might be thinking, I'm really behind. Everyone else seems to manage. If I speak up, am I going to be labeled as difficult? Will people think that I don't appreciate my job? And now let me reassure you that today is not about toxic positivity or just manage your time a little bit better. We're going to be talking about realistic solutions that you can apply today in your workplace. If you've listened to episodes 1 through 4, you already know this podcast isn't about fixing you. It's just about changing how you're going to move through the systems that are at play. So let's talk about this problem. Caseload overwhelm doesn't mean that you have poor organization. Caseload overwhelm just means that there is some misalignment that is happening between the demands, the capacity, and the support that you're receiving. And overwhelm doesn't mean necessarily that it's a time management issue. I think that it's a math problem that, hold on, this math problem, it's just not adding up, right? So let's talk about some of the common realities that are out there. We've got ballooning caseloads. We have unrealistic service minutes for some of our clients. We have paperwork that acts like the Gremlins, right? When you get them wet, all my 80s people out there who love the Gremlins movie. It's like if you got the Gremlins wet, they would multiply overnight, right? It's that paperwork that just seems to compound When we wake up, there's more and more of it. We've got meetings stacked on meetings. Let's have part one meeting. Let's have a part two meeting. Let's have a staffing before the IEP meeting. They're all stacking up. It's being told to just do your best, right? But there's no structural change that's occurring. There's some emotions that are happening out there. We've got fear of, well, the administration is going to say no, or they're going to push back. Or there's concern that we're not being seen as a team player. Or maybe we're afraid of that retaliation, right? Or we're thinking, if I do speak up, am I going to be replaced? Or I've watched other people be replaced when they've spoken up. There's also this confidence gap that's happening. So you might have even like newer SLPs thinking, maybe I don't have the confidence to step up and say the things that need to be said. Or there could even be seasoned SLPs out there who have just been conditioned to maybe stay quiet. I want to give a shout back to episode 1 of my podcast. Remember, we talked about conflict scripts. Caseload overwhelm is often where these unspoken scripts live. So let me break this down simply for you. There are SLPs, OTs, behaviorists. There are people out there who are advocating and they advocate well and they still hear no. And there may be others who are advocating that are using language that maybe I imagine have some demands or defenses that it isn't even intentional, right? But this language isn't moving the needle forward in their advocacy efforts. I know there are some people out there that want to advocate, and it's like, well, hold on, where am I going to go? Who do I talk to? Where do I start? I know the higher ups, but what's the exact chain of command, right? Who do I talk to? Who are the really big decision makers out there? And again, all of this, all of our advocacy takes a lot of skill. It also takes confidence, right? To kind of know, who do I talk to and how do I get that ball rolling? And do I feel comfortable and safe showing up in that space? So if you're listening, I want you to think about what's just one conversation lately that maybe you've been avoiding at your school site, just one. And it's not to solve it right this minute today, but I want to name it. And when we use nonviolent communication strategies, like I've been sharing with you in the other episodes, it is so that we can name the observations. We're not accusing, we're naming what we see. It's so that we can identify our feelings, not our opinions on the matter, but true universal feelings that are showing up for us. It's so that we can connect to our needs. What are our needs in this moment? Not guilting others, but what's real and alive? What am I needing in this moment? And then making clear, positive, actionable, doable, transparent requests of others. There is a difference between, and I want you to listen to these two statements, okay? The first one is, pretend we're advocating now, right? The first one is, you're giving me too many kids, versus saying something like, I noticed that my caseload just increased by 12 students this semester. I'm feeling really overwhelmed by this increase in number and I'm needing support because in this moment, I don't think I have the capacity to serve them ethically. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss some strategies on what we can do about this issue? So again, it's different than just saying, you're giving me too many kids, to rolling into a framework using nonviolent communication to name, I've got 12 more kids than I'm used to or that I had initially, naming the feelings of being overwhelmed, naming what you're needing, the support, maybe naming more concerns. I'm not able to serve these students ethically. I don't have the capacity. And then making that actionable, clear, positive, doable request. Can we meet tomorrow to talk about caseload distribution? So there we have the framework in our advocacy. Advocacy is not showing up with aggression, right? We can be firm, we can be clear, but it's not aggression. And again, when we're showing up with our boundaries, we're not saying we're lazy, that we can't take on these 12 students. We're saying that we have boundaries and we're bringing it back to student-centered. They're not going to be ethically served. If we call back to episode 2 in the Morning Commute podcast, you'll remember that you cannot advocate effectively when you're coming from a dysregulated and panicking place, right? Being calm and using regulation strategies is a form of intervention. Being calm is a form of strategy that we can use in our advocacy. So let's name some of those hard truths that are out there. We know they're out there. We have limitations because administration has limitations. There are budget constraints. These are real and true. There are staffing shortages. Like I said, I'm in Los Angeles. I'm in Southern California, which is like the beating heart of staffing shortages. We have such a great need for therapists here. We've got legal requirements. We've got statements such as, well, we've always done it this way. This is the way we've done it. This is how it's always been. I think that two things can live true, and that is the system is broken and you still deserve protection within that system. The system is broken and you still deserve protection within that system. So if part of you is thinking, yes, Stephanie, but I still feel stuck, I want to say that makes sense. You're not missing something. This can be hard. Remember, advocacy is not about always getting yes to everything, getting everything you want. That's not what it's about. It's about how do we reduce harm and how do we increase sustainability in our job. That's advocacy. If we think back to episode 3, I talked about empathy in that episode. And I want you to remember that empathy includes empathy for yourself, not just everybody else around you. So I do want to share something personal today, not because it's extreme, but I think some of you might recognize yourself in this story. And this story isn't about hating my job. I actually love the work that I do. It's a story about what happens when meaningful work becomes unsustainable and how easy it can be to normalize that. So, Golden Girls, right? Sophia, picture it. Picture it. Los Angeles, 2011. I sent an email to my boss. I actually recently pulled this email up while preparing for this episode. I mean, don't you love how easily we can kind of, search someone's name in your emails and find all the communication that you guys have written to one another. So this particular email I wrote to my boss, 2011, and I remember agonizing over it, right? I still remember sitting in my little apartment. I was in Venice, California at the time. I'm at my kitchen table. I'm trying to write it out. And I didn't want to sound too dramatic in that email. I didn't want to sound ungrateful because I just transferred from one district to another with the same contracting agency. I wanted to move from Long Beach to Los Angeles. And I didn't want to sound like, hey, I can't handle this job that I've only been in a couple months in this new district, which I think in hindsight already kind of tells you a lot. In this email, I shared that I was mentally and physically exhausted. And it was not in a vague way that I shared that. I wrote, I feel physical stress sitting on my chest. Again, I have that email still. And I broke down what the next 15 days of my job looked like so my boss could understand that. I had 5 IEPs, I had 5 afternoons of assessments with the preschool team, 3 district meetings with the director. I had 2 staffings, 1 off-campus observation at UCLA, and I had to include the drive time for that. And on top of that, I had my regular caseload of 36 students, which were all preschoolers. But now imagine these preschoolers are only available between the hours of 8:30 and 11:30 in the morning, and I had 16 preschoolers pending. Even just saying that, saying that out loud even makes my shoulders feel a little tense right now, and I have to take a breath, and I feel the physical sensation sitting on my chest. But here's the part that I think really sticks with me. The day I sent that email, I had actually called out sick. I knew I was fried. I knew my nervous system was shot. Go me, I knew to stay home that day, but not go me, because in staying home that day, I was still, and how many can relate? I was still at my computer, still sending emails, still writing reports, still completing work in the student information system. We call it SACE, SEIS out here. And this was my day off, right? And I was doing this because I was too stressed not to keep up and to get these things done. So I wrote something like, I enjoy this job. Don't get me wrong. I am very grateful and blessed to have it. I am not one to complain, I promise. And this was my way of kind of saying, like, please don't think I'm complaining. But here's what I know. That email wasn't complaining. It was my data. It was my nervous system saying, this pace is not sustainable. And this was my real first advocacy moment with that data, with those facts, those observations, and my feelings and my needs. Even though at the time, I thought I was just barely holding it together. I had also learned that the person before me in this position that I took over the position in August. I'm now writing this email in January. The person in that position before me had left for another organization due to burnout. And instead of that being a red flag for the system, I internalize it as pressure to, I got to push even harder. This last person couldn't do it. I need to be able to do it. So if you've ever minimized your own overwhelm because you love your students, or if you've ever worked on a sick day because, well, yeah, the work just doesn't stop, or if you've ever feared that naming reality would actually make you look ungrateful or weak, that's not resilience. That's survival mode. And if no one has ever said this to you, surviving your caseload does not mean you're thriving in your profession. And I want to say that part very clearly. Surviving your caseload does not mean that you're thriving in your profession. My boss did pay me for that sick day. There was care there, and that mattered. But when I came back, the caseload was still there. The meetings were still there. The pending students were still there. That email was January. I had to make it to June. So that kindness helped me for the rest of the day, but it did not change the conditions that I was returning to. And I believe that's the difference between support and sustainability. I think that season really taught me something I wish I had known earlier. Loving your job does not mean sacrificing your body or your mental health or your longevity in the field. And I think that passion without protection is the first, fast track to burnout. That's it, right? Advocacy, it doesn't start when we're falling apart. It starts when we get that confidence, when we're brave enough, right, to name what's actually happening there with facts, with clarity, without apologizing for what our limits are, using that NVC frame that I've taught you, that 4-step pathway to give the data for what's real, what's alive, what's happening in the moment for us. Because a system that requires you to burn out to prove that you care or to get the work done, we know that's a system that needs to change. And there's a lot of those. There's a lot of those districts out there that are running on that system. So, this reminds me of a quote by Mark Manson. So he wrote the book. I love this book, and it's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bloop, fill in the blank with the 4-letter F word there. And in that book, he says the famous, he refers to the famous line, with great power comes great responsibility. But what Mark Manson did was he actually flipped it to say, with great responsibility comes great power. And isn't that exactly what we're talking about? When you take responsibility for documenting your workload, for naming the challenges, for advocating for your students and yourself, you actually gain the power to influence change, not through loudness, not through aggression, not through force, but through clarity and accountability. So when I look back on that season where I sent that email in January of 2011, when I look back on that, or maybe it was January 2012, it was the 2011 school year, 2011 and 2012. When I look back on that season, what stands out to me isn't just the workload, it's how I responded to it. And over the years, I've noticed that most clinicians, they fall into one of a few of those patterns when caseload overwhelm hits. So if you're listening, I want you to notice which one of these patterns sounds most like you. No judgment, just curiosity, not to label yourself, just see where you fall. Because I can't tell you how many therapists have told me they prefer to avoid conflicting situations at work and would rather not deal with it. That compliance is sometimes easier than facing, the challenge head on or the confrontation that will be there. And this brings me back to those conflict response styles we talked about in a previous episode. And again, I got those from a book called Say What You Mean by Orrin J. Soffer. I use his book a lot as a resource. He is a certified trainer in nonviolent communication. He breaks these down. Again, go back to episode 1 if you want to learn more about that. But see where you fall, okay? Because here it is. Here's the reality. Some of us respond to overwhelm by avoiding conflict altogether. Conflict avoidant. We feel buried, we feel stuck, and instead of addressing it, we quietly start looking for another job that feels more aligned, right? That's the conflict avoidant response. Others passively accept the workload. We keep saying yes, we keep absorbing more. We keep telling ourselves this is just part of the job. Meanwhile, we're burning out on the sidelines, wishing that someone would notice just how much it is that we are carrying. Then there are those who express frustration indirectly, okay? Sarcasm, subtle resistance, little snide remarks, venting in safe spaces, but never quite addressing the issue head on, right? That's more of that passive aggressive response. And then finally, you have some that confront the workload and the caseload challenges head on. They're advocating loudly, forcefully, unapologetically, but sometimes without slowing down in a way to see how is this landing for others? How is this impacting others? Am I being too aggressive? Am I being too loud? And that's more of that confrontational style. You might fall into one of those. You might fall into none of those. And none of these responses are wrong. Every single one of them makes sense when you're overwhelmed and you're thinking, I don't have enough support here. And identifying your default conflict response style matters if it's one of those, because how you respond often determines where advocacy is going to actually lead to change, or if it's going to lead to more conflict or fanning that fire or burnout and exhaustion. So, if this does sound familiar, I break down these styles more deeply in episode 1, where we talk about our conflict response styles that show up at work, especially in schools. If you want to know which style you lean more towards, especially under stress, I did create a 3-minute conflict response style quiz. It's available. Again, it's not about labeling yourself, it's giving you the language and the strategies that actually work for your nervous system, so that you can use to show up in your advocacy to actually move that needle and change and to lower, the defensiveness. So head to my Instagram, golden.state.slp. You'll find the link there in my bio, or you can head to my website at goldenstateofmindpd.com. That's PD like professional development. Take the free quiz from there, under 3 minutes. You're also going to get a free PDF that's going to give you some tips and tricks to each response style. Here's the thing. Once you know your pattern, you can advocate in a way that's going to feel more grounded, more confident, and way less draining. You don't need to change who you are to advocate. You just need to understand how you respond under pressure. All right, let's talk about some small, doable shifts that you can begin to implement right now. You might be listening to me on your morning commute, headed into your workspace right now. You might be on that train, about to get off at the next stop. You might be in your car, about to park at your school site. You might be walking on foot. That'd be awesome if I could walk to my workspace. You might have your earpods in, listening to me, headed in and saying, what can I do right now? One of the things I want to recommend is that we shift from complaining to documenting. Every single day, data will beat emotion. Emotions are valid, and we do talk about naming them, but have the data to support the emotions. What do I mean? Track your caseload numbers, your service minutes, your time constraints, your missed sessions, your paper, what does the paperwork look like? What does that load look like? What is the emotional impact that it's having on you? How is your efficiency in your role being impacted? How are your relationships with your students or your collaboration being impacted? Because definitely pointing out about the students, all of our advocacy, it's best when it comes back to being student-centered. Get all that data. Then you're going to go to your next step and you're going to advocate with clarity, not with apologies. Okay, so we're going to kind of lose that line of, I know everyone's really busy and I'm really sorry to bring this up, and we're going to jump into reframing that apology into clarity. Hey, based on the current caseload and workload demands, this assignment is not sustainable. Okay, we're making a shift in our language. Then the next step is, whenever possible, use a collective voice. Okay, we know this. One person saying it is a great advocacy. 100 people saying it, 5 people saying it, 10 people saying it is even better, right? Patterns matter more than just an individual pain point. I do have to say that I imagine that more voices support your argument and voices become amplified, right? When there are more of you that are speaking up and sharing those concerns of what's happening in the system. This can also sort of help with minimizing any fear that is happening. If people are experiencing fear in their advocacy, getting a group together can help minimize that, right? And help build that confidence. Do it in a group. The next step is, let's just redefine our confidence, right? Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that. You're not alone, right? You're not alone in this. Confidence doesn't mean we're loud, okay? Confidence also doesn't mean that we're fearless. I think it's Brene Brown. She says, do it afraid, right? do it afraid. Be willing to advocate when you still have a little bit of fear, right? It's that moment when you're willing to be seen when you're scared, okay? Do it afraid, do it scared. Confidence means simply that you're grounded, that you're present, and that you're transparent and you're clear in your message. That's what confidence is. You can be clear, you can be grounded, you can be prepared. And guess what? Put those all together, you are confident. You have the confidence you need to move forward in your advocacy. If you think back to episode 4 in the Morning Commute podcast, I said how difficult conversations doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. They actually mean you're doing something right. It actually means something matters to you. Something is important. Your values are impacted. Your ethics are impacted. And you are bringing your voice to share this. You got this one breath at a time. Everybody who is listening, I know you can do it. Right after this episode, I want you to grab a notebook or your notes, your notes page on your phone or a spreadsheet. I just want you to start documenting just 1 week of your caseload and your workload. Track those number of students, those number of sessions. We've got great information programs, SACE, Synergy, that lists everything that we have as far as minutes and sessions and assessments that are coming due. Write them down, your service minutes. Write down the missed sessions because of all of the meetings that you had to go to, or your paperwork overload. Talk about all the reports that you have to do, the progress reports that are coming up, the assessment reports that still need to be written and that are sitting there. The testing's done, but you haven't even gotten to even being able to write those reports yet. Okay. Track any moments where you felt stressed or you felt overwhelmed or just kind of, I'm being stretched thin here. Track how is this impacting your efficiency with your students? What are you noticing? 1 week, just track 1 week for me right after this episode. Okay. That's it. No judgment, no fixes yet, just facts, just the data, get it written down. Why? Because advocacy starts with that clear, undeniable data. The moment you can show what's actually happening, not just what it feels like, although emotions are important, you begin to communicate with that clarity and that confidence and that focus. So even just 1 week can give you that leverage for a conversation or for an email that you've been needing to have. All right, we are coming close to the end of our episode here. So I want to remind everybody who is listening is our advocacy is strongest when it's student-centered. And when we use our nonviolent communication framework, the 4-step pathway, observations, feelings, needs, requests. Say it with me. Observations, feelings, needs, requests. Okay? And if you're listening right now and you're thinking, yeah, Stephanie, I can name all this, but I don't really actually know how to say it in a way that it's going to move that needle that you're talking about. I want you to know that that's not a personal gap. That's a skill gap. And guess what? Skills can be learned. Okay. We're going to learn the skills that we need to support our advocacy. And everything I just walked through, caseload numbers, missed sessions, emotional impact, how the efficiency is affecting our student outcomes, how those are impacted. That's the foundation of effective advocacy. And most clinicians were never really taught how to organize all of this information or how to communicate it clearly when they're in those high stakes conversations. But now you have the information. And that's actually why I created a 1-hour professional development course. I focus specifically on caseload and workload wellness. And in this training, I go much deeper into what I can cover in this 30-minute podcast episode. And we break down the real challenges that clinicians face with high caseloads and workloads. We name very specific things that you can bring into your advocacy conversations, all those script phrases, not just, vague complaints, but clear student-centered data. And we talk about, how do I handle this workplace conflict when these emotions are high? How do I advocate without burning those bridges? And how do I really take this 4-step pathway that you're talking about to create those advocacy emails? Maybe statements that I need to say, maybe conversations, and how do I do it in a way that's going to be grounded and professional and really hard to be, dismissed by people who are listening to me. So I did share this training. I had such a great time. There were so many people that came. Shout out to the SLP Summit Conference that happened. I think it was 2 summers ago. I shared this, and the response, I was the last person in their conference to share this 1 hour professional development, and the responses were so overwhelming. The chat box was blowing up, and people just were so thirsty for this information because it finally gave them the language that so many people were actually carrying, but just didn't know how to articulate. So if this episode resonates with you and you want just a more structured step-by-step approach, or if you want continuing education credit while doing it, that resource is available on my website at goldenstateofmindpd.com. All right, everybody, this isn't about being louder. This isn't about being more aggressive. It's about advocating in a way that's going to protect you, and it's going to protect the students that you serve, because sustainable clinicians provide better care. So let this episode be your next step. All right, so caseload, guys, caseload overwhelm. Listen, it's not pushing like hard effort into things. No, it's taking a step back and looking at it, because what's happening is caseload overwhelm is going to push talented SLPs right out of the field. We don't need martyrs in the field. We need regulated, supported clinicians. You don't have to blow up the system. You do have the right, however, to name what's not working. Get that data, okay? Advocating for your caseload is advocating for your students, and you're allowed to matter in the process. Never give up, okay? You can never advocate too much. If you hear no 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, keep advocating. Keep asking. There's a book I read by Ike Lassiter, and in his book's called Collaborating in the Workplace. He says it's always good to debrief after conversations. So go back and ask yourself, what worked well? What didn't work well? What could have gone better? What needs of mine were met in the conversation? What needs are still not met for myself or for others, right? Your conversation partners. And he says that conversations really give us opportunities to keep learning and growing. So reflect on that. Reflect on your advocacy after the fact. Think about it, keep fine-tuning it, and never stop advocating to meet your needs. You just never know when that answer will flip from a no to a yes, or more needs will be met. And don't forget, you have the confidence. You can do this one breath at a time, one NVC step at a time. You've got this. I believe in you. Okay? All right, don't forget, every episode has a song to kind of match the vibe. Again, you can catch Breathin' by Ariana Grande, and now you might understand a little bit more why I'm cranking this song back up. Ariana Grande, Breathing. Check it out on the Morning Commute Episode Vibes playlist on Spotify. I think it's perfect for the drive or your walk, or maybe just for a moment to breathe. Don't forget to listen back to episodes 1 through 4. Think about the things that we talked about today. Where is fear driving your silence? Where might confidence be quietly waiting? Okay? And if this episode felt like it was reading your mind, send it to a colleague who might have mentioned that they're also quietly drowning, or who keeps saying, I'm fine, but you know they're not fine. Share this episode with them. To every SLP out there, to every therapist out there, the teachers out there, your voice matters. Your boundaries matter, and so do you. You're doing meaningful work in a system that does not always make it easy, and that's not lost on me. I've got your back, one conversation at a time, one episode at a time. And if you need support, or you have questions, or you just need to vent, send me a DM on Instagram at golden.state.slp. I'll see you on the next morning commute.